So unfortunately, we are not moving right to lunch. So we are moving from high pizza to the very fun conversation of franchisee relationships. Nobody jump out of your seat, right? I kid. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Russ Romeo, the Senior Director of Marketing Activations for Checkers and Rallies. Russ, you do have the very fun challenge of making franchisees fun. Are you up for it?
Yes. I'm not up for being before lunch, but yes. It is an interesting thing to work with franchisees, and it always keeps you jumping. It always keeps you hopping. And I wanted to start with saying, what keeps me up at night. And I was going to start with something like very business-oriented, but it's not really keeping me up at night now. What keeps me up at night now after attending this summit is I'm feeling a serious delayed FOMO from last year's blackout conference. And I'm like, what did I miss? And how good it is? And can tomorrow we just turn off the power and just see how that plays out?
Yeah, we'll just turn off all the lights. That won't be weird at all, right? No, it'll be totally fine.
We start with these two lights. All right.
Russ, so first tell us a little bit about yourself and Checkers Rallies and where you guys are at in your brand journey.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been with Checkers and Rallies for about 3 years. I oversee media, and I oversee field marketing and public relations. And you say, well, it's kind of interesting that why media and field marketing? Because the media for us is controlled by our franchised co-ops. So there's a definite link between field marketing and building relationships and how the media gets spent. Our co-ops are separate legal groups, legal entities, where they can vote on how they want to spend media. So that's it's a lot of influencing to do that. So, and people ask me, are there a difference between Checkers and Rallies? They are identical. They were two brands that came together probably about 30 years ago. And Checkers is more like east of the Mississippi, Rallies more west, but wherever it was started, we kept it. And the second question is, do you want to go to one brand? Absolutely. But you're dealing with franchise agreements that are 20 years old, and you got to go into that whole legal thing. Anyway, and then before Checkers, I spent about 20-some-odd years at Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, right.
So there I did brand marketing, field marketing, supply chain, and new market entry, and a little bit of operations.
So, and you guys are in a little bit of a media transition right
Yes.
now. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So Checkers and Rallies, we have a pretty small footprint. We're about 900 stores. Our PRAs, our average weekly sales are about 20,000 a week. So you base your ad funds off of those from a percentage. So we certainly can't compete against the McDonald's and the Wendy's, any of those big guys, right? And for the last, let's say 20 years or so, Checkers has been run with a base of broadcast TV, linear TV, cable, some radio. And at the end of the day, I'd like to say we thought we were on TV, but none of the customers really thought we were on TV because we couldn't afford the levels that would break through, right? If you're going on with like 50 or 60 TRPs. So we had a new CMO come in, Scott Johnson, about 8 months ago. And he and I and others are working on transitioning us from a base of broadcast to moving into digital. So we are now testing in a handful of markets going into 100% digital and moving it through. So online video, CTV, we're doing paid search, branded, non-branded keywords. We are also going into programmatic digital with Performance Max. And so we have just started all of that. And so far, early indications are it's promising. I don't see us ever going back because quite honestly, when you think about our size and our footprint and our budget, going into TV and linear TV is just not something that we're going to be able to make a presence on. But digital, we can, and we can target certain audiences, and we've begun now to target low-income consumers with special value deals. We are targeting Hispanic for the first time in a way that's meaningful, at least. We're targeting late night, gamers, second shifters, right? Or people that are on or about online late night. We know who they are. So we're targeting specific messages to those segments of the audience, as well as our what we call our event messaging, right? So right now we have a brisket melt. So it's brisket on top of a burger. So that's our event message. If you haven't tried it, it's outstanding. Seriously, burnt ends on top of the burger with all sorts of sauces. It's very good. So we do that event messaging as well.
So to a bunch of marketers in the room, this sounds obvious. We're like, yeah, totally makes sense, right? But how did you get the franchisees aboard and bought into this journey of going to local and 100% digital?
So it's in process. It is not like when you're running your own company stores. Franchisees are going to want, I think as Melissa said in the back too, they're going to want to know what is your plan, what is your KPIs, what are the results that you're looking for, what does success look like, and then benchmarking that and providing it back to them in a authentic, honest way. And also, with digital, there's a lot of optimization, as many people in the room know. We live this, right? There's always a refinement and an optimization. You're always chasing that customer and continuing to optimize. Franchisees don't really get that. What franchisees tend to get is, well, 20 years ago, I went on TV, I bought a lot of media, it was like a light switch, boom, sales went up, right? Well, now digital is a longer term. So you have to say all of that up front, and you have to say it in a way that is authentic. But at the end of the day, in working with franchisees, and I like to say it's simple, but it's really not easy. The simple part is you have to have a basis of a relationship. Doesn't mean you guys have to get along so well, but you have to have a sense of trust, and they have to trust you. And that relationship really kind of greases the wheels to say, I accept what you're saying, I'm going to work with you. And I think one of the pitfalls that I see a lot in working with franchisees, particularly on the brand side, brand folks, which I'm one of, is we think we know better, and so many times we do, but they also have insight that could dramatically change how and what we do. So I think in listening to franchisees, it's really seeking to understand. And that sounds easy, right? Seek to understand.
Yeah.
Really do it. Really just pause, put yourself in their shoes, and hear what they're saying. Try and weed out sometimes when franchisees talk, the passion that they have or the words that they use or some of the street that they got going on, right? But listen to it. There's usually a diamond in the rough. There's usually an aha moment going, okay, now I see what you're saying with the customer.
What were some of those insights that you got? Like, is there one that sticks out in your mind that you got from a franchisee that changed the way that you approach your marketing strategy?
Yeah, so we were going through, we have value, we're a value brand, right? So we actually had our value menu, which was a topper on our menu boards, right? And it was like a twofer, buy two for this, get this price, two for that. You can mix and match, right? Then we came out with a $5 meal. We kind of saw what Wendy's was doing with the biggie bag, right? Packaging, the $5 seems to be a price point of interest to consumers, right? So I said, let's do that. We ran them both. And we said, okay, now we have both of these values. And we, of course, did what marketers do. We beat it to death. And we kept running it and running it and running it until customers were like. And then so franchisees came back to us and said, we said to franchisees, okay, we're going to go with one. We're going to pick one, and we're going to go with the $5 meal deal. The franchisee came up to me and said, no, Russ, what happens is, there we go. Maybe the battery going out here, or maybe they just want to go to lunch.
It's definitely wanting to go to lunch. Yeah, the mic is like, we're done here.
So I killed the microphone. So the franchisee came up to me and said, Russ, no, there's two different people going through my drive-thru. The $5 meal deal are people that like individually for themselves, and the mix and match are families and groups, or people that are buying families, and they know their customers because they're watching them through the drive-thru. So being brand people as we are, we said, well, really? Well, let's do a study. So we did a study. And it showed that the mix and match was for group users and the $5 meals for single users.
They were right.
They were right. So that's one set of insight that we had. And how they said it was nothing like how I'm saying it. It was a little bit different. But you got to pause and really kind of put yourselves in the franchisee's mindset and you almost kind of walk out of what you are to listen. Yeah. I think if you're working with franchisees, if you are uncomfortable, do you support the franchisees? Are you supporting the brand? If you are feeling uncomfortable, if you are feeling conflicted in where you're going, you're probably doing the right thing. Yeah. Because you are balancing. You have to balance. If you go straight brand and this is what we're doing and this is who we are and get on board and the train's leaving and all of those things, they're not going to give you the kind of trust and respect that you're going to want. Yeah. And if you don't have that, everything else you do will be more difficult.
Yeah. You mentioned, the media is being controlled by those local co-ops, right? So how much control do they have? What does the brand own? What does the co-op own? How do you maintain brand consistency?
Yeah, that's a fun one. Every day we go through this. When I first joined Checkers, I'm like, what? Really? The franchisees have total? Well, so when you have a cooperative, let's take the New York market, the New York DMA. We have about 40 stores in New York. All right. How it works is the co-op, if it's franchisee dominated, meaning 51% of those members in the co-op are franchisees, right? They can vote. And what they vote is to spend co-op dollars. Co-op dollars for us are geared towards marketing, of which about 90%, give or take, depending on the co-op, is gone to media. Right? So they're really essentially voting on media. What we do is we give them a recommendation and a strategy on media that has to make sense. Sometimes they take it, sometimes they revise it, right, to their point of view. Right? That's a whole different discussion. And then what we control is the messaging. So since we control, like all franchisors, control the marks, the logos, the brands, the message, we control that. So if a co-op said, you know what, we're going to buy the media, but we want to run a completely different message. And the answer is, well, no, you're not. Right? Because we're going to say this is the message that we have. So there's some control that you can provide by saying this is the available creative that is open to the co-op. So you kind of shrink down the messaging that you have. And then they control the media. How you influence, how you convince, how you sell in, although I guess you're not supposed to use that term anymore, but how you work with that in building that kind of trust is going to be the success of them following you. And if they don't follow you, and if they're not going through with what you're going through, and you're constantly at odds, or they're constantly going a different direction, they've lost confidence in you and the team and the brand, and now you have to go back, like we were talking with, I think I was talking about rebranding. You got to go back and refocusing on the franchise relationship.
So what happens if and when a franchisee goes rogue off of the marks or materials that you provided them?
So that's like daily. I don't like, the old term is herding cats. It's very much like that. So what we have to do is we have to be really clear on what dynamics that we want to control within the franchise agreement. So the first thing I would do is, I always say this to the franchisees in my team, I put the franchise agreement aside for a moment. It's in the drawer. If I really need that, we'll get to that. But that's not where I'm going. Pick up the phone and give them the background of why this is bad. All right? And you always got to start with the why, but don't start from the why from a brand perspective. Start from the why from how they would think about it. Okay? Give them and by the way, sometimes I've said, look, this is our rules, this is our strategy. I don't say rules. This is our strategy. You may not get it, and I understand why that might be difficult for your network, but this is why we do it for the brand. And that becomes different. Now, hopefully you've convinced that individual. If not, then you say, look, you really don't want to go down this path. You're not going to, it's going to cause a problem. We got to do this. We control the marks, and we don't feel this is brand appropriate. Then if it's still a problem, which 95% of the time it's not, you say, look, you can't do it. It's part of the agreement. I want to work with you on it. Let's come up with an alternative. Yeah. So it's basically saying no, but let's come up with an alternative that's going to get to the end point. What is the desired end state that you want to get to with this, whatever you're running? So I think about a franchisee when I was in Dunkin', and this was really inappropriate. And he was having a big opening store, and it was a big grand opening event in his stores. And it's an old-time Dunkin' franchisee. It was problematic in a lot of different ways, and just an inappropriate guy across the board. One of those people that.
Where are you going with this, Russ?
So, he tells me I have an idea for the grand opening. I want all my female employees to wear a shirt that had D on it, double D's on the shirt. And that's exactly what I groaned. I said, and then it was like, are you kidding me? Are we really having this conversation? So had I let him do it, or had he not told me, they would have done that, and you can imagine how that would have happened in the media.
I think they were ready to cut off your mic just in the event it got too out of control.
And any of those who know me, that's a good idea.
Keep your hand where you have it, because I think you're hiding the antenna at the bottom, actually. Yeah. Keep your hand. You're doing great.
Okay.
So,
So this is the antenna on a wireless mic. I've just learned something today.
you talked about Checkers being a value brand, right? And I think all franchisees can have a complicated relationship with the word value, right? Because it's hitting their P&L, it's hitting their bottom line. But then you also talked about selling in the why. So do you take that same approach when you're trying to sell in new value programs or offers or discounts?
Oh, God, yes. You're going to have to use facts. You're going to have to use persuasion on strategy. You're going to have to use how they're thinking about how they want to take the business. And it's got to be, what I like to say, it's about driving sales profitably, which goes back to the long-term question before of having, I'm not touching them. I'm gonna do like this. Okay, so.
We're making this as hard as possible for you.
So, next thing, my chair's gonna break. all I asked for were the lights to go out. I didn't need the mic to go out. All right, so yeah, you got to start with the why, and you got to back into it. I always like to start with the desired end state of sales. So we have a program that's designed to build long-term sales. Sometimes you have to give up short-term sales, and you got to call it out. You're going to give up short-term sales to have a long-term gain. You got to bring people in to try the brand, and you back in. Now you show them the metrics. Most franchisees, particularly the engaged ones, the guys that you want on your side, aren't going to be numbers. So you got to, and listen, many marketers are not into the numbers side so much. You got to get into the P&L of the food cost, food and paper cost, because they're maximizing their P&Ls, right? And when you talk about the numbers, you got to talk about what the intent is, and then you got to talk about the, not the lifetime value of the consumer, but the longer term, maybe the annual gain of it, right? And you got to speak in ways that you got to be careful of the jargon. So I'm very, very hesitant to say, like, if I'm talking about media with franchisees, I don't use lower funnel, upper funnel. I don't get into that because they don't understand it, and they're going to view it maybe. I want to speak to how they would get it. This is the Italian coming out.
Yeah,
by the way.
I got it. Yeah.
Come si dice. So that's kind of how I work with it. And the last thing is, with the franchisees, I always like to pre-sell. So I kind of have the meeting before the meeting.
Yeah.
So if I get like 2 or 3 franchisees that I feel are engaged and influential, both, right? You got to have both, and reasonably smart, hopefully. I get them on board ahead of time and say, what do you think?
Yep.
And that gives me 2 things. One, they'll probably set me straight on some things I have wrong, or how I present it. And then 2, I get them on board, so I now have ringers in the room, right? And they can support it and say this and that. And so it really kind of, you walk into the room and you've had some of the meeting before the meeting.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, you talked about language, right? We forget that they're not marketers. They're operators, right? So why do you think that brand and franchisee relationship is just so complicated in the first place?
I think that each are in a silo. So I find that a lot of brand folks are in the brand vernacular, brand mindset, brand vision, and this is what I know, and this is what I know to be true, and they speak a little bit Venetian. And then the franchisees come in, they're a little bit street, right? They're working with the customers every day, and they're speaking, from a standpoint of Mars, right? This whole Venus-Mars thing. And so never the two kind of shall meet. What you have to do is get to their side in their language, and the first thing you have to do is understand what their pain points are.
What are those pain points?
So the pain points are going to be with marketing. So I always thought we wore white hats and we were the good guys. But a lot of times when you're an operator and you're focused on operations, sometimes marketing is not wearing the white hat, in that you're creating all these LTOs for me. Right? I have products coming in, so I have a new burger that's coming. Let's take a look. We talked about the brisket burger we have. All right, the brisket comes in gigantic packages. It's a 6-week program, and the packages last for 8 weeks. Well, that's going to be a problem. Now I've added all this new build, so my crew has muscle memory for all of this. Now you've added new sauces and new this and new that. Yeah. Now you've come out with 3 brisket sandwiches, a melt, a big sandwich we call the Bosswich, and then a brisket loaded fries, which are banging, by the way. And then now you've got these 3 products to do.
Right.
And so if you're a real operator, operations focused, marketing can be a challenge to you, because in 6 weeks, all of those go out, new things come in, or it's a price point. Now you got to change your register and you change your prices. So you get to the point where you say to the franchisees, I understand the operations complexity. I actually go through it with them sometimes.
Yeah.
Here's your new SKUs. So I get that. Once you say I get that to them and you really do mean it, they kind of step back and say, okay, they kind of understand it, and it opens their mind. If you come in there and say, this is wonderful, this is great, this is amazing, you need to do this, and see you later, well, you've most likely lost a good majority of the franchisees. And if you lose the majority of the franchisees, we were talking earlier about operations, right? They're, for us, because we're mostly franchised, that's your operations. Right. So you can put any ad you want in. You can create any LTO product that's amazing. If it's not executed well for the customer, or the order is wrong, right? Or it took too long, or they're gone.
Yeah. Ops complexity is really the unsung KPI that no one really talks about, that we have to focus on.
You have to talk about it.
Yeah.
You have to talk about it.
How often are you in the field, in the restaurant, kind of just being as hands-on as possible to better understand your operators?
Not enough, because we all live by the same thing. I mean, just how many emails have we gotten all this morning, right? And they want this meeting you've missed. So it's a real challenge you have to carve out. And you just don't go to the field. What I like to do is I like to go to the field with purpose, intent. Yeah. But what I've also done that's been successful, so before we had our new CMO, and it wasn't really the CMO issue, it was just how we were set up. A lot of franchisees told me when I first got to Checkers and Rallies, we don't feel we have a direct, we don't feel management or the team is listening, really listening. And that's just not saying what they said back, it's actioning what their points are, or at least some of them. I created a very, again, I said simple, but a little more difficult. I created a very simple thing called Roundtable. And I got franchisees that were engaged, influential, right, that I knew would probably get along, and kind of regional, because we're technically a national company, right? Although our bases, like everyone else, you have depth in certain areas. And I had this roundtable, and we would come in, and they helped create the agenda, and it was informal. And I don't show PowerPoint presentations. God bless you. I don't show PowerPoint presentations purposely. Once I say that, they actually perk up, right? And we go through the agenda items of what do we need to do in the business now. They give me a list, and then it's my job to kind of work on that list with them in the moment. I don't take everything they take. We kind of agree to it, and then I go to my management, right, my CEO, my CMO, and we start to implement some of those changes. You implement a couple of those changes, that roundtable becomes probably the most important meeting. Yep. And as I like to say it, it's not an official meeting. It's not a recognized meeting. There's no on the agenda. It's purposely done below the radar to affect above the radar.
Yep. And so is that kind of how you maintain a feedback loop of getting information down to them and then receiving information up from them?
Exactly. We have our own text group. It's very honest. It's kind of whatever it says at the round table stays in the round table, and you got to really live by that. You got to have open conversation. I've said in those meetings what I thought was incorrect in our strategy from my perspective, but that doesn't mean I went out there and said our strategy was wrong. I said this is my feeling, but this is what I have to do, and this is what we're going to do, right? But it's being open. It's listening, significantly listening, because there are times they brought up a topic where I was like, are you guys like crazy? And then I listened through it, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like the question I asked yesterday about refunds and cashbacks, that came out of the roundtable, and it wasn't even on the agenda.
Yeah. And as a marketer, you wouldn't normally think about refunds,
not at all.
Right? It's like not my problem.
Not at all. It's as much as thousands a month.
Last question before we open it up to the audience. What's the worst thing you can do as a brand marketer when you're building relationships with your franchisees?
First, every promotion isn't amazing and wonderful. So I've had FMMs go in there and present, and listen, I want them to be positive, proactive, professional problem solvers. That's what I always say, right? And you got to be positive. Right? But if you say every single program is amazing, the best program that ever happened, you've lost them after a while. Because they're like, everything can't be. So it's kind of like you got to be authentic, I guess is the best way. There's this authenticity that they have, and not listening. When you just keep reading your script, and you don't take in really what they're saying, and kind of processing it and trying to understand their point of view, and you just keep saying, this is the company line, this is the company strategy, this is what we're doing, yeah, but, and never change, and never alter, and never really kind of react in an authentic way, you've lost them.
Russ, I think you made franchisee relationships as fun as it possibly can be, right? Any questions from the crew? John, I give you permission to call on someone randomly.
Okay, good. I'm doing it.
Joshua Sims.
So Joanna from Zaxby's. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh my God, you really?
You know Russ very well. All right. No pressure. Oh,
Oh,
here
we
we go.
got one.
All right. Hang on. We got two now because I saw you, and I'm going to someone
It's
back
the
here.
sound guy. Move your hand this way.
Thank you. Thanks, Russ. We chatted yesterday. I'm from Big Chicken, Anna. Curious what kind of technology you're using to move files from you to franchisees, and then follow-up question: how do you know if they're reading the emails or texts that you're sending? Because that's a problem.
Okay. So I'll start with the second question first. They're not reading your emails, and they're not reading your So I seriously, and this is not gonna sound fun, but what I do is I find most franchisees have their preferred method of communication. So I have franchisees that only use text. I have franchisees that will only go on a phone call, the real old school, right? I have franchisees that I can get them on emails. So I try and do that. So I will send the email, right, because it's a reference piece, and then I will text. I will send the email, give a quick call. I've actually sent a text that said to one, read your email, right? And it worked. He was like, oh, okay. So that's how I kind of, and understand they are not in front of a computer. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of the folks that have 50 stores, they have a depth of team, they have a marketing person, they're probably in front of a computer. Most of them are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stores, they're usually out and about. So you got to understand that. You got to say they're not doing what we're doing. Yeah. The second question was saying, how do I move files? Like, I was just curious. You mean data for them?
Yeah. Which DM are you using if you're using one?
Which DAM?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, if it's a DAM, you're not going to get through them. So I'm going to take it the other way. I'm going to say, how do I send franchisee data that they're going to be able to understand, digest, and get them to hopefully my point of view, or at least my thinking, right? Is that the ultimate?
Yes.
Okay. I don't send them raw data. I may include an attachment. I will put it in a little Excel spreadsheet, or I will put it in a chart, and making it painstakingly simple, and then circling it with red and saying, here is the data. And by the way, I try and keep it to 2 or 3 points. And it's not because they don't understand it. It's because they're really busy and they're only going to give you a certain amount of time. Yep. And you want to get to the you don't want to win the battle and lose the war. So you get to the point that's the juggernaut of what you're trying to do or their pain point. And then so I really manipulate the data to make it user friendly for that audience. And I think that's whether it's presentations.
I think we have one last question over here.
Hey, thank you so much for the. Yeah. Oh, thanks
You don't
for the
hold
master.
the bottom of the microphone. You just hold the top up here, and then you lift
Thank
your
you for
leg
the
like this and put your hand like
masterclass in
that.
wireless and in franchising. So I love this kitchen cabinet idea. I don't know if I got the term right. So does your executive management, they know that you have this advisory committee that is like your private, like, hey, you guys, is that all condoned from the top? Because I love this idea.
What a great question. What a really great question. It's like, how do I answer that the right way?
If they don't, they know now.
So, in the beginning, I had to give a little bit of background. I really did. And so what I said, it was an action-oriented discussion group designed to drive drive sales and transactions via marketing. I had to use marketing because the ops guys get really upset if you start doing this, right? In marketing. But we talk operations too, by the way, because it's so intertwined. So I did tell them I was doing it. I don't overemphasize it. I kind of play casual. Yeah, I'm getting this group together. I think we need a little bit of a feedback, right? And I kind of underplay it. The very first time I get some feedback that's, let's say, really valuable and pertinent is when I say, this is from the roundtable, and I let it build upon itself. I don't become the PR person. In fact, I underplay it, because as long as it's a under-the-radar meeting, not formally recognized, because let's face it, those meetings have agendas, PowerPoint presentations, and franchisees come in there like this, right? And I mean, I showed you 400 slides today. So it's more of that kind of thing. And I let it take root on itself. Let it prove itself. If the feedback is valuable, one, you're doing it right, and two, you are convincing management to make those changes. And then once you make those changes with the roundtable, the franchisees are like, all right, this is awesome. Okay, this works. And I will say one other thing too, if you're in front of franchisees and you want to get their attention at a meeting, and I've done this a few times, let's say we're PowerPointing them to death, right? Which is very common in marketing people, myself included. Stand up, I walk to the projector, and I shut the projector off. And I said, okay, and I walk into the front of the room like this, I said, let's have a discussion. Now, everyone from their phones, who has spent like the last 2 hours like this, goes like this. And now you got it, by shutting off the projector, because after a while, the slides become a distraction.
I love that. Russ, thank you so much.
Thank you.